You're watching the News Hour. Coming up, the number of casualties from the earthquake in Japan is as yet unclear, but we can be fairly sure it's mercifully much lower than a similar-sized quake in Turkey last year. But why? We'll speak to an expert next. You're watching Sky News. Top stories so far this hour. Japan has downgraded its tsunami warning after a powerful earthquake struck Japan's west coast. The Defence Secretary Grant Shapps has said the UK will not hesitate to take direct action against Houthi rebels targeting cargo ships in the Red Sea. And provisional figures have shown a 36% drop in the number of illegal small boat crossings in 2023, the first time it's fallen year on year. Let's get more now on the impact and the aftermath of the earthquake in Japan. I'm joined by Anastasios Sextos, Professor of Earthquake Engineering at Bristol University. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. And so this was a very powerful earthquake and quite shallow, but touch wood, reports of collapsed buildings and casualties so far, and I emphasise so far, are mercifully low, aren't they?
Martin, yes, indeed. The losses are significantly lower than we have seen following recent, equally, I would say, strong earthquakes worldwide. So the predictions are that if things go as they seem to be going, like there is no other major shock coming, then perhaps the whole thing will be down. We'll be able to absorb the consequences in a reasonably small amount of time.
And this resilience, is it about infrastructure? Is it about building standards? Is it about preparedness? What are the reasons?
Well, it's a little bit of everything, I have to say, because resistance and resilience to seismic loading is actually a multi-parametric problem that involves both the characteristics of the earthquake, the location of the earthquake, and the preparedness of the state we're talking about. In this particular earthquake, there is something a bit peculiar. The earthquake happened on the west coast of Japan. That's not as frequent as happening in the east coast of Japan, like the earthquake of 2011, for instance. And this means that the exposure since the earthquake occurred offshore, the exposure of major cities to strong shaking was way lower. So the earthquake was strong, but it was quite far away from the coastline and really like 200, 300 miles from the major cities in Japan.
So this would explain, I mean, I was in Turkey earlier this year, and there was an earthquake of similar magnitude, also similar depth, but there was catastrophic damage there, and tens of thousands of people lost their lives. Here, very different.
Very different, because the earthquake in Turkey, A, was onshore, and secondly, there was a dual earthquake. One was 7.5, pretty much like this one, and right, like 8 hours after, another one measuring 7.8. So essentially all buildings were exposed to very high accelerations and forces back to back within a few hours. In this case, because the earthquake happened onshore, and because it took some time for the seismic waves to travel and they faded out, despite the strong accelerations, the buildings were not affected as much, and the fatalities were really, really very low. But you said about preparedness previously, and I think this is key, because Japan is world leading in preparedness in every way you see it. They are learning from earthquakes after the 1995 earthquake in Kobe, the 2011 in Tohoku earthquake, what caused the Fukushima accident, actually. They've learned from that, they revised their codes many times, they're leading the technology worldwide. Many buildings are scientifically isolated, and also there are sea walls protecting from the tsunami. Above all that, there is an excellent early warning system that sends messages to civilians through mobile phones, as you've shown in the news, to evacuate buildings quickly, and also to be waiting for tsunami and evacuating some entire regions, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that point you make at the end there, the warning systems, the early warning systems in place seem very, very efficient.
They are very efficient indeed. Of course, we don't have to confuse them with prediction of earthquakes. Actually, they trigger a message after the earthquake happens. But these, as the waves take some time to travel and reach cities at some distance, they give some vital questions to civilians to exit the buildings, and they give some a small number of minutes for people to be waiting for tsunami. And this is effective in California. We've seen it in Mexico. So it's a new technology. Now it is feasible, provided that the earthquake is not very close to a major city. That's a major disclaimer I have to make. Early warning systems are quite efficient. They give vital seconds.
Professor, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.